on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot. Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Those spicy peanuts you had for breakfast are really helping you out here, aren't they? You're feeling energized.
I told you I had to wake my mouth up. I'll be like, mouth, it's time to put in work.
Oh, okay. I just had a cup of coffee like a normal person.
Yeah, I got to eat some spicy nuts, right? Get those in my mouth, swish them all around with some sun drop. Hey, Shelby.
We missed Offbeat this past week. We were out of town on vacation. We went down to Savannah, Tybee Island, one of my favorite vacation spots. I hope to move to Savannah one day.
Man, Savannah's pretty dope.
I love Savannah.
It's hot, right?
Yeah.
But other than that,
It's gorgeous. I love it. There's so much to do. I feel the vibe there. It's my kind of town. And our trip to Savannah actually inspired today's episode, Dylan.
the reason you feel the vibe down there is because there's frozen rum drinks everywhere you look.
I feel the vibe down there is what I'm saying to you.
Any flavor you want.
Now, before we get into today's case, we have a couple of announcements. Let's start first by thanking our brand new patron who so generously signed up at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast, donated money to the show. Obviously, they're sponsoring today's show, so that's Gretchen. Thank you so much. Because of Gretchen, you're getting this amazing true crime case delivered right to your ear holes.
Oh, God, right in the ear
Mountain
hole.
Murders. Yeah.
Thanks, Gretchen.
And if you would like to sign up at Patreon as well, not only do you support the show, but you're going to access ad-free episodes of our regular podcast episodes, plus bonus content, lots of stuff over there. We have a few patrons who are like, hey, we've just been tearing through the content.
Oh, my God, they've been digging in my back catalog.
And there's a lot.
You know how disconcerting that feels sometimes?
When they're in your back
To
catalog.
know people's going through my back catalog.
Well, as long as they're using a lubrication, Dylan, I think as long as they're greased up, it's okay.
Use protection when you listen to that.
Let's announce that we do have a live show, our first live show back since the pandemic. It is going to be held September 24th from 6:30 p.m. probably till about 8:30 p.m. in Sylva, North Carolina at the Lazy Hiker Brewery and Tap Room.
Yeah, we can't wait to get out there again and meet some folks and fans.
What's really cool about this show, Dylan, at the Lazy Hiker is they have food.
Well, that makes me happy.
So not only do you get true crime, but you get food. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm hearing a juicy murder story, I want to tear into like a hamburger.
Of course.
Because I like to eat. They also have drinks because hence it's a brewery and tap room.
Oh, my God.
Which is going to be great. I have to limit Dylan. He could have 2 drinks before the show. And then he has to wait till the after show party to really loosen up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would be taking his clothes off. It would turn into the full Monty, and I'm just not sure our listeners are prepared for that.
I can live with those rules. I think I can live inside those guidelines.
But tickets went on sale this past Tuesday, and if you would like to purchase some tickets, brownpapertickets.com. If you keyword search Mountain Murders, it should pop up there. We also have a link available. If you go to our Instagram page in the bio, there is a link that will take you to purchase tickets. And also we have a Facebook event where you can access the ticket link as well. We've already sold some tickets, Dylan. Seating is limited, so you want to make sure if you're going to come to the show, get those tickets. I have a feeling we might sell out before September 24th.
Yeah, it's a nice venue, but it's not a huge venue. So if you're thinking about going, you better get that done early.
Yep. All right. Are you ready, Dylan?
I woke up ready.
That's why you had to eat those peanuts, huh?
You had to wake my face up.
Okay. Well, we have a great story. Like I said, this was inspired by our trip to Savannah, but this has been a murder story that I've been interested in for quite some time. It's very fascinating. And you may be familiar with it because there was a book and a feature film made by Clint Eastwood about this case.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might be like me. I've heard of it. I knew about the case, but not so much the details. I didn't read the book. Watched the movie years ago. So I think it's a very interesting case.
Well, some folks who were actually there and had firsthand knowledge of the case and the people we will be talking about believe that the author took some creative liberties with storytelling because it is supposedly a nonfiction book, but there's some stuff in there that they say is not 100% accurate, and I've been able to dig down, find some more details in this story and about the characters involved that might change your outlook on the case itself, and maybe just give you some information you didn't know.
So the author took some liberties, or maybe exaggerated,
Some
or
creative liberties, yeah. I mean,
Some-
there was some stuff in there that people dispute that, it's not exactly how it happened.
well, and I think that always happens to a degree. Maybe they exaggerate this one thing, or maybe they, conveniently leave this one part out. If it doesn't follow their narrative.
And we are talking about John Brent's Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And of course, that was turned into a movie in the late 90s. Clint Eastwood, it starred John Cusack, Kevin Spacey.
I wonder if Kevin was touching boys on the movie set.
Yeah, we're going to talk about somebody
bet he
who
was.
touches boys. So let's get into it. Dylan, are you ready to be quiet?
Oh my God, I bet he was.
Shh, okay. Enough.
Okay.
Enough talking about Kevin Spacey's diddling of young boys. Let's get on with our story. So James Arthur Williams was born December 11th, 1930 in Gordon, Georgia, which was a small mining and farming town east of Macon. The Williams family were known as quality people from good breeding.
Hey.
I always love when that term good breeding is used because it makes me feel like we're fancy dogs.
Yeah.
On like one of those dog shows.
From good breeding.
Like someone's checking my teeth and my hind legs.
Do you think people would describe your family like that? Like you came from, you're well bred or good breeding?
Well, I have to say, just in my family history, I think people would say good breeding. But then when they actually meet like my family today, they might have said that about my family like 100 years ago. But today's family, they're a little dysfunctional. A little fucking crazy.
I'll tell you what, them Heights took a turn for the worse there about in the 50s.
Something. Okay. Well, the Williams were known, as I said, quality people from good breeding who had made their way from England to Boston and eventually settled in central Georgia, where they prospered as farmers. So we're talking old school, straight off the boat, Pilgrim era folks.
So they just came to America and instantly, it's interesting. A lot of immigrants, even to this day, have a mindset when they come to America. Like, this is what I'm going to do. It's a land of, many people view it as a land of opportunity, though, there's a lot of things that kind of makes it harder nowadays. But they come in with a mindset like, I'm going to, back then would be get a, homestead, a farm, put down roots and make some money. And they were very driven people, it seems.
Arthur, Jim's father, was a barber, and his mother, Blanche, was a secretary for a local kaolin mining company.
Okay.
Do you know what that kaolin? I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly.
Spell it for me.
Kaolin. Our listeners are just like, what the fuck is she talking about?
Yeah, it was
Some of them probably know. I know, I sound like an idiot.
It was a mining company, people.
So worked for this mining company. Jim looked like his father, a handsome man whom he got his dark hair from his dad. Now, he had one younger sister named Dorothy, whom he called Doe, or Dio. Now, the family was very close-knit. He spent a lot of time on his grandparents' farm at Turkey Creek and was surrounded by a host of family, aunts, uncles, cousins, just one of those big, sprawling southern families where everybody lives very close to everybody, which we see a lot of that.
Yeah, you see
in
that.
the South and in this region.
Yo.
Now, eventually, Arthur and Blanche would divorce, but the family remained close afterwards. Now, from a young age, Jim exhibited an entrepreneurial spirit. At the age of 14, he was already buying and selling antiques that he thought were valuable.
Wow.
Spending time expanding his knowledge of such items, he loved old wooden furniture so much that Arthur built his son a wood shop in an old tobacco barn where Jim could work on restoring and refinishing and building wood furniture.
Yeah, I think when you see someone start at that early of an age, an interest in, have a very strong interest in a hobby in something to the point where they're actually already kind of making money and stuff, I think that truly shows they're passionate about whatever, their interest is.
Were you like a small 6-year-old child, like pretending to build fences in someone's backyard?
Yeah.
You're so passionate about that.
Getting some sticks, making them a little privacy
your
fence.
little like G.I. Joe dolls have like a nice fence.
No.
Okay.
No, at 14.
Your action figures didn't have a nice fence? Well, that's a damn shame.
Well, I did start working when I was 15. So I'm still a kid at this point at 14.
I thought you were a man.
I'm a man.
Well, Jim's love of antiques were spurred on by his passion for history. It greatly pained Jim, even at a young age, to see the destruction of so many fine old rural farm and plantation houses, including some of those great old barns with the beautiful wood.
Yeah, those are getting harder and harder to find nowadays because, of course, they crumble and deteriorate.
People reclaim that barn wood and want to build doors in their fancy houses and stuff. So
what the hell, dude?
it's like a whole industry of reclaimed barn woods.
You just hijacked my talking point.
Sorry.
I was going to really do that one good.
Go for it.
But no, it's exactly what Heather just said is, people are tearing them down intentionally now to reclaim all the wood.
Jim enrolled at the Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida, where he focused on becoming a certified architectural preservationist by studying interior design. He also studied antiques, architecture, and old houses. Now, while in college, he also learned to play piano and organ.
Oh, organ, that's not something you hear that often, right?
Not often. My grandmother was an amazing organ player. And as a child, she was so talented. She played organ at the local church, like at the church where they went, the Baptist church where the family went. And so people still know her for that. And when people were like, oh, who's your grandma? Or, grandparents, and they find out about my grandmother, they're like, I remember she was like 10 and played organ and was like super great at it.
Wow.
And she always had an organ in her house.
Damn.
Yeah. But it is an unusual instrument.
Yeah, and it typically is connected to the church or something like that because you don't really see them outside of those settings.
No, but I loved playing with it as a kid. The electric organ. I'd be in there like making all sorts of weird beats and sounds.
Oh my gosh. And then you be like the Phantom of the Opera, have the huge one, where the pops go all the way up to the ceiling and shit.
Yeah. We actually have one of those old antique organs similar to that in our family.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, damn.
It's like probably well over 100 years old. It's very elaborate.
Let's sell that shit.
Yeah, my uncle has that in his possession. I don't think anyone's selling it. But yeah, the organ. I can't do the Phantom of the Opera. Okay, so he is learning to play piano and organ, and after art school, which was a program he finished in 2 years compared to the typical 3, which I think just goes to show that Jim Williams was a real go-getter.
Yeah,
He's
definitely.
very focused, even as a young man. Like, he had a laser focus. He knew exactly what he wanted and took steps to get there.
Yeah, and he's putting in work. I mean, it's not like this. You don't finish a year early in high school or college by, being lazy or someone giving it to you. You have to go get it.
He studied at Mercer University in Macon afterwards. Then he went on to work with an interior design company based in New Orleans. He also spent a small stint in the Air Force. It was in 1952, after leaving the Air Force, that Jim settled in Savannah. It was during a time of economic growth with the post-war boom. He fell in love with the city and architecture, growing deeply saddened by the loss of homes in the historic district. Savannah, if you're unfamiliar, is a coastal Georgia city, and it's separated from South Carolina only by the Savannah River. It is well known for its antebellum architecture. The historic district is beautiful, isn't it, Dylan? It's filled with cobblestone squares. There are so many parks in Savannah. Like, I love that about Savannah. And these beautiful parks that have these oak trees covered in Spanish moss. Forsyth Park is probably the most famous of those squares in Savannah.
Yes, they're simply beautiful, and you have all these old growth trees, oaks and stuff. Even down just the regular streets, and a lot of the neighborhoods have these very old big trees that hang out over the road, and you got the Spanish moss and then the homes. We were just there looking at the homes. They're just beautiful.
Like every house there is my dream house.
Yeah.
In the Victorian district. There's horse-drawn carriages. At the center of this picturesque district is the St. John the Baptist Church. Historic River Street. I mean, it's just a very gorgeous area, vibrant history. I love it there.
Oh my God.
So it is easy to see how Jim Williams, being someone who loves history and architecture, fell head over heels for Savannah.
Are you going to cheat on me with Savannah?
I would if I could.
You would leave me right now and move in with Savannah.
I would leave you right now and move into some apartment in Savannah by myself.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. We can have a commuter marriage.
No, that's fine, dude.
We can record via Skype.
Oh,
or
yeah.
Zoom.
Oh, yeah. So that'd be great. So we can record not on our hardware here in person, and we can both have like different tones and sound fucking stupid, is what you're saying, because we're on Zoom now.
Well, one of us probably sounds stupid anyway.
So you just gutted the podcast.
Regardless.
For what? For Savannah?
To live my dream. Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Many buildings were being raised for parking lots and garages at this time. Every week, Jim watched as one of the beautiful Victorian district or historic homes were being torn down. Jim became a salesman for Klug's Furniture Company at the corner of Victory Drive and Abercorn Street. It was then that Jim realized his ultimate goal was to begin restoring old houses in Savannah.
Oh.
The inner city had become crime-ridden, and affluent folks had moved out to the suburbs in droves. All these gorgeous old homes were falling into disrepair. Most of the Victorian homes were divided into tenement housing for poor families, which further drove down the property values. And we see that a lot in cities. Like, we talked on many episodes about the white flight, when all the well-to-do white folks move out of the city and into the suburbs. And that is exactly what happened here. And then they leave behind these big old houses and they divide them up into apartments. Got to have a place for low-income folks who can't afford to live in the suburbs, right?
Yeah, it's a cycle, and it's almost like once it starts, you can't stop it. These people, once we got the interstate and the cars, and people just were able to drive 30, 40 minutes to work. And that just changed everything for the city's center. And oftentimes we've talked about how, like whatever you would call your projects or your, what's a better word for that?
Like your low-income housing? Or
that's not good.
Or like subsidized housing or something?
Let's call it subsidized housing and stuff. It's typically in the city center. Or it's like prime real estate, if you will, nowadays. And it's
well, yeah, because it's built so that folks can have access to public transportation, where they can get back and forth to jobs, have access to grocery stores, all the businesses that they would require. Because it is hard to be poor, but it's very hard to be poor in a rural area where you live like 40 minutes away from anything.
Well, I mean, that's a whole different ball game.
And Dylan can attest to that growing up.
Yeah, but and then it's funny because you're seeing this cycle happen all around the country. And it's like, they build it this way back in the day for, various reasons. And then later on, people change their minds. Like, wow, I want to. And so then the gentrification, wow, why can't I say that word? Then they gentrify it and they come back to the area.
And then they push out the people who've been living there for 40
generations.
Or 50, yeah.
Yeah, and now this area's been ignored and whatever, and now it's cool again. It's all of a sudden cool again. And so they flood in and then they push everyone out.
Well, you can thank Jim Williams for that in Savannah.
Damn it.
Wealthy families no longer lived in these big antebellum style mansions in the historic district, but instead spent their money on homes in places like Ardsley Park. In 1955, the Savannah Historic Foundation was created after the old city market was raised for a parking garage. And this really, like, raising this old city market and building a parking garage, like, really got the attention of folks in Savannah. Like, up until this point, they didn't care seeing this downtown area just be mowed over. But this old city market that had so much significance and a rich history, like watching that be torn down, like that's when people really started to take notice that, like, wait a minute, maybe we need to start preserving some of these places.
Well, yeah, because once it's gone, it can't be, you can't get it back.
Exactly.
Yes.
Through the 1960s, things worsened in Savannah as suburban shopping centers and malls popped up. Banks would loan money to restore old projects in the historic district. Homes could be purchased for as little as $5,000.
Oh, my God.
Oh my gosh. I want one of these houses so badly, Dylan. If every one of our listeners just gave us $1, maybe we could buy one.
Oh, my God.
So why don't you guys just donate $1 so I can have a beautiful Victorian in Savannah and you can all come visit. So Jim, who was a homosexual, began forging friendships with very important people around Savannah. And I bring up his sexuality because it is going to play a pretty important role in this story. Now, his remarkable, persuasive, charismatic personality struck people, and they considered Jim to be very trustworthy. He had impeccable taste and style, much like myself, Dylan. Jim was handsome and a bachelor. So many of the wealthy and influential men of Savannah were also gay or bisexual, often locked into upper crust societal marriages. And being gay himself, Jim understood discretion was key. He knew many of these men who would be making financial decisions that could impact his future were in a conundrum of sorts. They wanted sexual relationships with men, mostly young men, but didn't want to get caught.
Yeah, and it's a shame that anyone would feel the need to not just be out in the open with who they are. But it happens.
But it was a different time then, Dylan.
It was a different time, and even to this day, you know, that it's in business and certain circles, people still hide it. I know of someone who hide. Well, it's not hidden, but they don't exactly talk about it. You know, and you can tell that they should have every right.
They're not living out
fully. Exactly, and that everyone has a right to do that.
Developing friendships with Jim was safe for these men, so Jim took advantage of the situation, seeing an opening to insinuate himself into Savannah's old money families. He was able to schmooze and coax his new friends into investing in the restoration projects that he sought out. He befriended the wives who wanted William's interior design skills. And this is how he charmed his way into Savannah's high society.
See, this was a perfect situation for Jim to get. He has a goal in mind. We know he's goal oriented, and this is a perfect vehicle for him to get there. And these what his personality and stuff just makes it probably pretty easy for him to gain people's confidence and trust, and then when you rub up against true wealth, I mean, it starts benefiting you in all kinds of ways.
It was during this time that Jim was also seeking out younger men for his friends. He would hit up the Greyhound bus station, finding the most good-looking young men, many runaways, stepping off the bus. It's like that same old story. Getting met up at the bus stop and swept away into some alternative lifestyle. I was just thinking of The Deuce, that HBO show, where the pimps go to the bus stop and find, like, the bright-eyed Midwestern girl, and they're like, "Hey, you," and then you see her on the street, and then she becomes a porn star on the show.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that's that really happens.
Yeah, no, totally.
That really happens. And when I was younger, I would ride buses to various areas, and I would just stand at the bus station, and no one picked me. You know what I mean? It's like being back in school and not getting picked for the basketball team.
So no one wanted you for sexual relations, or?
No one tried to turn me out. No one picked me, took me back, gave me free drugs, got me strung out, and forced me to do sexual favors for strangers
And now you're
and
not
give them all the
on
money.
film showing people your butthole. I
Yeah.
mean, you do that, but it's mostly for fun and not like a career.
Exactly. So
All right.
where could I have gone if they just picked me at the bus station?
Well, if you just stayed in school, you could have come down to the like high school bus lot, and I probably would have picked you.
You told me to get my fat ass on the bus. Let's go.
That's not true.
Yeah, you would. Okay.
I would have been like, get your cute fat ass on the bus.
Ooh.
Let me have a squeeze.
Oh,
Okay.
baby.
So month after month, Jim would comb the bus station looking for sexual partners, not only for himself, but for his friends. He often housed these teenagers at his own place, vetting them. If they were leaving town, like from their hometown, trying to get to the city, if you will, because they were gay themselves, or they were just desperate to make some money, he would keep them around. Like, he would kind of fill them out. Are these people who could be trustworthy, discreet? Are they desperate enough that they would be willing to do whatever for money? And if they hit the marks, that was it.
Well, I must say, it sounds like Jim is in it for his benefit and his friends' benefit and not like to truly help. Maybe I'm wrong, but not to truly help these young people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fucked up. I mean, that's shitty. That's pretty messed up. Don't you?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in the film, I think paints Jim, and the book paints Jim in a certain light. But the reality is, like, he wasn't this great person. Like, he did some pretty bad things himself, and we're going to talk about those. So then he would introduce the young men to his friends. Later, when he was more successful, he stopped hitting up the bus station and relied on the young hustlers who worked on Bull Street. Jim was a predator who lured poor young boys between the ages of like 15 or 16 to Mercer House, which we'll get into his purchase of Mercer House later. But most of them were just like in awe of the opulence of this house. I mean, it was a fucking mansion, and they needed money so badly that they would do just about anything to earn some money. And Jim wasn't procuring young men for money because his currency was influence. So it wasn't like he was pimping these young men out. I mean, he kind of was in a way, but it wasn't like a financial gain. It was a way to get in with these men who would be backing him financially.
Well, yeah, he's at the bus station, picking these young men out because the other men around, powerful men, don't want to be seen at the bus station, picking some kid up. And you can imagine from the young person's perspective, you get off a bus with, $20 in your pocket or something, not a pot to piss in, and then you meet this cool, charming guy who's handsome as well, and then he takes you back to his house.
And seems like he has shit together because he's obviously got money.
He's got money, nice house.
Taste, style.
Introducing you to other people who obviously have money.
The epitome of like a Southern gentleman.
Yes.
Because that's what everybody said about Jim, is that he had this very genteel quality. Like, he was a true Southern gentleman. Like, when you met him, that was your first thought.
Yeah, I feel like in the movie, Kevin Spacey didn't nail that kind of quality of it. And I think Kevin Spacey actually did a pretty good job in that movie.
Well, I'll talk about this more at the end, but the author John Berendt actually really didn't like Spacey in that role at all.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think about Spacey and his role as Jim?
I mean, I've always liked Kevin Spacey until I found out he was a creepy perv.
I did too.
So, I don't know. I mean, he's pretty talented.
That might be one of my most...
And I think physically, he nails the part of Jim Williams. Like, he carries that look very well. The
Right.
mustache, the dark hair, the suits, the very Southern
right.
charm kind of thing going on.
Yeah,
you
he
know?
nailed that, I think.
Anyway, so Jim needed acceptance into a society that normally would have been closed to him. The old money of Savannah was fairly tolerant of sins as long as it was kept quiet.
Well, I think that's always true.
It's like, as long as we don't have a huge scandal out of this, we're going to look the other way, even though we know what you're doing.
Well, and that's just money. With money comes influence.
Exactly, and power. Now, early in his career, Jim Williams didn't have much money. He owned one suit and often borrowed money to help pay for routine expenses like food and rent. He relied on friends to feed him during those times, and he used a lot of credit to survive. Like, he literally would go hang out with, like, some teenage friends in the neighborhood, and their mamas would cook, and he would go eat dinner at their house because he didn't have any money, so they would just feed him dinner every night. So he's truly a self-made man. I mean, everything that we can say about Jim Williams, his character, maybe some unsavory things that he did, but he really, truly earned his money.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But his goal was connections and, getting in certain circles. And he used these tools at his disposal to do just that.
Dylan, we're going to go ahead and pause for a quick break, and we will be right back. And we are back, continuing on with our old Southern crime story, Dylan.
Oh, pull a rocking chair up.
I feel like I should start the rest of the story in my Southern accent, like I was stoned in Steel Magnolias or something. I do relate a little bit to Weesa.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone would enjoy that.
In 1955, at age 24, Jim bought his first 3 buildings, 541, 543, and 545 East Congress Street. They were single-level homes. Now, over the course of 35 years, Jim would restore more than 50 houses in Savannah, as well as others across the low country of Georgia and South Carolina. Some of the most notable homes Jim restored include the Mercer House, the Hampton Lollybridge House, the Pink House, and Armstrong House. Now, eventually, the first 3 houses did sell for a reasonable profit. He hired crews of young men who hung around Washington Square Park, and he would pay them when he could. All the boys liked Jim, and most never suspected that he was gay. Jim hid his homosexuality very well. He was masculine and good-looking, so women liked him, and he could pass for straight, which he would use that to his advantage when he needed to.
Yeah, I think it's definitely obvious that he's like a chameleon. He will kind of change to whoever, he's trying to be around.
Well, and a big question among his circle of friends and people in Savannah, a lot of people maybe who didn't know directly Jim's bedroom activities questioned, is he or isn't he about being gay? And I think a lot of them turned a blind eye to that fact because at the time, of course, it was like, scandalous. But also, they were in denial. They didn't want to know for sure because women saw him as like this eligible bachelor.
Right.
And so a lot of women pursued him thinking like, oh, well, he's a very eligible bachelor here in Savannah.
And he's presenting, oh my, he likes the ding-a-ling, right?
But then like men also didn't want to recognize it if A, they had homophobic feelings, or B, maybe they were into it and knew about it, but they didn't want to bring it up because then they might out themselves.
Oh my God. How do you keep up with all that?
So there was kind of a lot going on as far as that goes. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it sounds like he could present himself however he wanted to.
Yeah.
Right.
With some money in his pocket from the first sales, he set his sights on houses along East St. Julian. He would put down these small, like little down payments on these houses to hold them until he could figure out funding the rest of the project. He didn't make a lot of money doing this, but he was networking, making important connections with people who would later be willing to fund these elaborate restorations. Now, often Jim would live in a house after he had restored it. So the first big house he bought was the Odingsells house. And there's a bunch of history related to all of these properties, and I had considered kind of giving you guys some background on them, but I feel like that would be another like 2 or 3 hour episode because there's a lot of info. So if you're interested, you can go find out more information about these houses. Some of them were like pre-Revolutionary War built homes. Many of them built around the time of the Civil War in the early 1800s. So there's just a rich history. So he moved into this home in 1961 after he had completed the renovation. He brought his antique shop with him, and eventually Jim would end up buying the entire block of houses.
Damn.
Jim Williams was a superstitious person. So in the book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which of course made famous his story, showed Jim having dealings with Minerva, who was a voodoo priestess. And the truth is, Jim was into magic and the spirit world. Jim was a client of Minerva's husband, known as Dr. Eagle. And I've also heard of Dr. Buzzard, and I think that they're the same person, but I'm not 100% sure. And Dr. Buzzard, I'm just going to call him Dr. Buzzard for the sake of this story because that is what I've always known him as. So he was a root doctor. And root doctors are part of the Low Country's history. They performed a wide variety of services, such as removing curses, preparing love spells and potions.
Ooh.
Yeah. So what do you know about roots, Dylan? You know anything about getting roots put on you?
Well, I put my root on you earlier this morning when I woke up, right? No, nobody.
That was a really small little root.
Hey, you know what? But it's in high demand, right? It's like my dick is ginseng, right?
What a little root.
It can't be cultivated. It has to be grown in the wild on a bank, a shady bank, and then found by people foraging in the forest.
I really don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and neither do our listeners, but what else is new? Okay, so you've got a little tiny root. We know about it. You didn't put it on me this morning. If you did, I was unaware.
Well, it's like I always tell you, my belly's going to touch you first, girl, but you just hold on.
That is the damn truth. Okay.
Well, I've heard of, old timers, growing up.
So roots is like part of like the voodoo religion that's morphed into hoodoo, which is more of like the darker types of magic.
I will say, me personally, that's always been connected kind of to the black community here in the South. Somebody's working roots on you. Well, it's like if you had bad luck. Or
it comes from a lot of the African religious beliefs and cultures
hoodoo
that were brought over by slaves,
right,
and continued to be practiced, even though mostly it was practiced in quiet or in the dark, if you will.
It's true,
because of course, slave owners they were Christian and they wanted their slaves to be Christian, but these folks were still out doing like these rituals and performing these magic and spells, and it's very interesting. And I think at some point we should do an offbeat episode all about the Low Country, like Gullah Geechee culture, hoodoo, voodoo, that kind of thing.
Oh, we really could. It's very interesting.
I find it fascinating.
Even in their home countries to this day, voodoo and some of these things are carried out in secret.
Well, folk magic is prevalent in so many different cultures. I mean, we have the hoodoo, voodoo, folk magic that was prevalent in these African and Caribbean cultures, which of course, that would be part of the black community. But then, of course, here in Appalachia, we also have our own folk magic. Some people call it powwow. You've got granny witches. There's a lot of that in the mountains as well.
Well, and we'll get back to the story because we really could talk for hours about this. Very interesting. But I think every culture has that healer,
some element
shaman
of folk magic, if you will.
Folk magic, witch doctor. But I think they all represent the same thing to those communities.
And I think it's fascinating. And like you said, Dylan, we could talk about it all day, but we won't.
Yeah. So Jim was known by some, I guess his very closest allies, to believe in voodoo and to actually participate.
Oh, yeah. He was really into it. He often went to palm readers. Even when he was traveling Europe, buying antiques, he would go visit palm readers, tarot card readers. Like, he was into it.
And I think this goes back to him. You said earlier he was very superstitious. And I think those things are usually closely connected.
You think so?
Well, superstition a lot of times can almost always go directly back to your religion or to things you believe.
Okay.
But someone who's exceptionally superstitious, does things the same way, he's got the lucky socks or whatever, like truly believes these things help, I think oftentimes could believe in something like palm reading, voodoo, curses,
astrology.
Yeah.
Well, in the 1960s, Jim bought an island.
What the hell, Jim?
Cabbage Island. It was a marsh island with very little land that was under 6 feet of water at high tide. So when I say he bought an island, I mean he bought an island technically, but it was kind of like he just bought a sandbar.
It's more like a sandbar that's exposed at low
certain
tide.
times. Yes.
Right.
Well, he bought this island so that he and his friends could party, fish, and drink. He later sold it to the Kerr-McGee Corporation for $660,000. This enormous cash infusion gave him the ability to invest in more properties, lavish restorations, and collect high-valued treasures. He now had means to travel to Europe in search of antiques. He began studying auctions, how to buy, how to sell, attending. He started going to Christie's, Sotheby's. Jim had begun his own impressive collection of Fabergé. In the late 1960s, he bought the most notable property, Mercer House. And this is also when he bought the Pink House, the Armstrong House, but the Mercer House, big part of the story as well.
Well, it seems that's the one he liked the most, right? Maybe.
Well, that's the one that he ends up living in, and I can give you a little history about the Mercer House.
And so now it sounds like he's stepped his game up. He's put all this work in, made all these connections, and now it's starting to pay out for him.
So Mercer House is located at 429 Bull Street in Savannah. The actual home itself was completed in 1868, and it stands just adjacent to Monterey Square, another one of those beautiful manicured parks. It's a pretty cool house. It was designed by John S. Norris for General Hugh Mercer, who happened to be the great-great-grandfather of songwriter Johnny Mercer, and construction began in 1860. It was interrupted, of course, by the Civil War, and then was completed later in 1868. The interesting thing, Dylan, is nobody of the Mercer name or family ever lived in the house.
Okay.
Yeah. This is really a disturbing story about Mercer House because some people do say it's haunted, not only because of the Jim Williams story, but because in 1969, an 11-year-old named Tommy Downs fell from the roof of the house and was impaled on an iron fence on West Gordon Street, which is the southern side of the house. They think he was hunting pigeons. The 2 spiked prongs that he landed on are still broken to this day.
Oh, wow. So, well, yeah, something like that happens. That's definitely going to, people are going to remember that and be some kind of legend or story come from it.
Some lore surrounding that story.
Definitely.
The Savannah Shriners had used it for a temple, and then it lay vacant for about 10 years until 1969, and that is when Jim Williams bought it for $55,000 and then spent the next 2 years fully restoring it. So it has a unique history. Though Savannah is a southern city, it has a queer counterculture that easily rivals that of New York City. So there were several bars in town that catered to the LGBTQ community throughout the 1960s and still today. Now, Jim didn't try to hide his homosexuality from his close friends, and he sometimes invited them to accompany him to Savannah's gay bars, like the Lamppost. A longtime friend of Jim's said that his taste, meaning Jim's taste, in men or boys, because he often would end up with these like teenage 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, he kind of liked them young, that his taste was street trash.
Ugh. You like some dusty, huh?
I like them a little dirty.
But I'm just fresh off a 10-hour bus ride.
I like them a little trashy.
Yeah, I got no money.
As you stand there smoking and drinking a beer.
Eating.
I like them a little trashy.
Yeah, eating gas station food.
Well, he often frequented these bars looking for these wild young things, is what his friend described. Now, Jim would spot an attractive young man and usually ask the bartender to find out if this person would be receptive to having drinks with Jim. He had a huge problem with rejection. People said Jim was a total gentleman until he got turned down for sex. And then he would lose his temper.
Well, that's not a good sign.
So he did not like taking no for an answer. And he was also really embarrassed and humiliated if he would get turned down, which would kind of in turn, I guess, his ego would get crushed, so he would get all mad.
Well, it sounds like he puts forth this, I'm put together, well-polished, handsome
but
package.
Insecure.
But it's all just a cover up of his insecurities.
Yeah, I think he was an insecure person for sure. Now, Jim hung around Club One, which still exists today, and provided a drag show hosted by none other than the Lady Chablis. So if you watched Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, you got to see the Lady Chablis in person in the film. She stars, plays herself, has a cameo.
And
she's great.
The voodoo priestess.
Yeah, Minerva is actually in the film as well. Now, in the 1970s, Jim's hard work was starting to pay off. He had transformed the Mercer House into a showplace. His antiques business was thriving. Jim's best clients were not in Savannah. They were the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, Kemper insurance executives. He built up such an exclusive clientele of buyers that his shop was only opened when those wealthy clients flew into town to do their shopping trips.
Wow. So he's
exclusive.
And once you, so that didn't happen overnight, and that didn't happen by accident. That happens by him networking, putting forth a certain image of himself the entire time, and it slowly built up to where he has this reputation.
Jackie Onassis once tried buying a small green jade Fabergé box encrusted with rubies and diamonds, offering Jim $90,000 for this item.
Damn.
He refused her. He had just purchased it at an auction for $70,000. And so he could have made the $20,000, but he loved Fabergé so much that he turned down $20,000 from the First Lady.
Well, yeah, and he also is a collector and does like things, but I think in his mind, it adds to that, like, you know, the way you said that now, if that spread around certain circles, oh my God, you know, he turned down Jackie Onassis, you know, like, that almost adds to his individual lore and legend.
The Mercer House became famous for Jim's elaborate parties, specifically his Christmas party, and invitations were sought after. It was kind of one of those things, Dylan, where people considered it like the party of the year. The party of the season, if you will. Just very elaborate. Like, he went all out, catering, the best food, the most expensive champagnes, liquors, booze, live music, band, you know, I mean, these were like black tie affairs in the Mercer House.
Oh my God.
Hobnobbing with like all of Savannah's elite. People as far as Atlanta would want to get an invitation. I mean, it was a big deal.
Damn, I could have just went down there in some cutoff shorts and boots and like a halter top shirt and just hung around kind of on the street
like
right
a little
there.
Crop top.
Yeah.
You just like digging your belly button
and
drinking a beer and burping.
Yeah.
Like Cousin Eddie.
Act like I'm lost. Like I'm
Yeah.
just some poor young man who needs direction. And
Even
next
though
thing
you're
you know,
like in your 40s.
yeah. Next thing you know, I'm in the party, bruh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would think that you were like some kind of hired entertainment.
Well, no, I would just be one of
Like, oh, look, this year he's done something very charitable. He's got some poor, unfortunate soul here to be one of the caterers.
I would be one of Jim's trash dolls.
Excuse me, sir. Are you walking around with a cigarette lighter?
I could have got in the party, is what I'm saying.
I believe it.
Okay.
You're very sexy, especially in your booty shorts. One example of Jim's temper flaring was when a 1979 made-for-TV Civil War movie was filming in Monterey Square. It shut down Jim's antique business. The street was covered in mud to simulate a city square in the 1850s. The longer the film dragged on, the more angry Jim became. I mean, I understand. Wouldn't you be mad? You live in this fucking nice-ass house. You live in a fucking mansion. You've got a business you're running out of your home, and there's a film crew around you 24/7, and they've muddied the streets, and you've got horses shitting everywhere. I can understand why he was getting frustrated.
Well, that sounds like a lot for the neighbors around that site to deal with. It's not just like they have to shoot a scene, shut the road down for 2 or 3 hours. They've actually, modified the entire area in not a good way.
And Jim was pissed. He did not like this. He had a huge collection of Nazi memorabilia that he had gotten while he was in Europe. So he ended up hanging a Nazi flag on the Mercer House balcony so that they couldn't film his house.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, later someone pointed out that the Jewish temple was just across the square. Jim was quick to apologize for the offense. Like, he really wasn't trying to offend anybody, hurt anybody's feelings. He was just trying to fuck with his film crew.
Right.
But this incident would haunt him for years to come.
Well, I mean, I know he was just messing with them and thought that'd be a cool way, and just maybe happened to have this along with other collectibles from being in Europe. But I think he should have maybe had a second thought on that before he hung a.
Well, what I thought was pretty interesting in my research is that Jim was a huge history buff, but apparently he wasn't that into World War II history. And so some of his close friends thought it was really odd that he collected this Nazi memorabilia, because it wasn't like he was some avid World War II history aficionado who had this stuff because of the historical significance, and it wasn't exactly considered antiques either. And so some people were almost kind of like, ugh, like it was kind of a put off that he owned these things.
Maybe he just thought it was taboo, one of the more taboo things to have in a collection. Maybe he was secretly, digging Nazis. I guess I can't speak for him. But
I almost feel like it might have been more on the edge of it's that sort of like dark,
right?
Like a lot of people buy murder memorabilia, that kind of stuff. I mean, I think maybe it teetered more on that, like it was kind of taboo and naughty, as you mentioned.
Well, yeah,
but who knows? Maybe he was secretly like a Klansman and like wearing a Nazi uniform through the streets. I don't know.
We've struggled with. We want more memorabilia, murder memorabilia, but we also are like. It's kind of gross.
There's a fine line because it's like there's victims.
Yes.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, if we got a Gacy, for instance, which there's a lot of those out there because he produced them like a factory. And at what point are you celebrating that person and not just like, fascinated by the horrible crimes they committed and sad for the victims? So there's a really fine line there. And I think Nazi memorabilia has always rode that line, right? Even if you are a history buff, educated in history, I don't love it, but I'm very interested in World War II. I've watched a million things about it, but I don't know that I would be comfortable with a Nazi flag displayed on my wall.
Exactly. And we're totally getting sidetracked with this information, but you're absolutely right. And I would say I am very interested in World War II, and I've been fascinated with that period of time. And I feel like I am pretty knowledgeable about it. And like you said, watched plenty of documentaries, read books. I'm very interested in the military history surrounding that era. But yeah, I mean, even though we collect kind of dark oddities and whatnot, I don't know if I would be comfortable owning anything that had a fucking Nazi symbol or flag on it.
Now, I must say that the last thing I will say about it, that symbol meant something completely different.
Right.
Before the Nazis hijacked it, it actually was like a symbol of kind of like hope or, workers' rights or fighting or standing together, community, something like that. And they hijacked it. But I must say, it is possibly the most inflammatory image in modern day.
Totally is.
Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I just don't think I would be comfortable bringing something like that. Just the energy of something like that into my home.
I think Jim fucked up by draping the Nazi flag off.
Oh, he did. And this
house.
is, like I said, something that's going to come back to haunt him for years to come. And especially once he's being scrutinized for the crime.
Oh, it's going to
we will be discussing.
It gets dredged back up.
But Jim wasn't just a face who knew antiques. He was also a hard worker. He spent hours restoring the antiques himself. Jim walked around with calloused hands. Some described him as the most interesting person they'd ever met. He was highly intelligent, funny, and he had a way of just making people feel terrific. Like, people loved being around him. He would make you feel like you were the most important person in the room. Though he was gay, he was very conservative in his ideals. Someone called him a Southern chauvinist.
Oh, wow.
But Jim's dark side was controlling and manipulative. He also had significant issues with his business ethics. Maybe even doing criminal things, Dylan.
Yeah, I don't think Jim minds manipulating people or the situations strictly for his benefit. It doesn't bother him a bit.
He would promise a client to restore an old piece of furniture reproduce it. He would keep the original and then give them the fake.
So they get a new shiny looking thing that looked exactly
And
like.
there were like multiple cases of this type of thing. One example in my research was some elderly sisters that were considered kind of like spinsters, lived in some big old Georgia farmhouse. I'm not sure how, but he manages to find out they've got a certain like dining room table and chairs that are some period piece. He really wants it, goes there, tries to buy it from them. It's in shabby shape. It hasn't been well cared for. So he's like, let me buy it. They won't sell it. And he's worried that if they pass, he may not have a chance to get his hands on this thing again. So he makes a deal with these ladies. I will have this thing fully finished and restored for you under the, I guess, guise that one day, if you pass, somebody will let me have a shot at purchasing this. These women consent to this whole thing. He sends it to some factory, I think it was in Pennsylvania, gets an entire reproduction of this table chairs, gives it back to the ladies. They're none the wiser. And then he takes the original, of course, worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and refinishes it. So he's a fucking con artist.
So he stole
He's a
from
crook.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're none the wiser because they get this great table and chairs back that's actually new and in really good shape.
He did this with coffee tables, end tables, desks. I mean, multiple times he would con people like this.
Well, yeah, even if you have antiques in your house, not all of us are going to be able to spot a fake or a reproduction. You know what I mean?
Right. No,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be like Williams and have an extensive knowledge of antiques and want to look for. Well, it was on May 2nd of 1981 that Jim Williams' legacy would forever change. It was on this day that he was arrested for the murder of Danny Hansford. In the early morning hours of May the 2nd, Hansford and Williams had an argument at Mercer House. Now, at this point, Jim and Danny had been involved in a sexual relationship for about 2 years. During this argument, Hansford pushed over an 18th century grandfather clock. Williams was in his study at the time. Hansford then entered the study, drew a gun on Jim Williams, and fired. However, the gun jammed. That's when Williams pulled a 9mm Luger pistol from his desk drawer and shot Danny. He claimed it was in self-defense, and thus begins our story of murder.
Oh, shit.
You like how I just jumped into it?
Yeah. Damn, knee deep.
Yeah.
Get up in it, girl.
Yeah, I go balls deep. Danny Lewis Hansford was born March 1st, 1960, to parents Charles and Emily, who already had 2 sons. Now, his parents divorced when Danny was quite young. When Danny was 9 years old, his father Charles took a gun and ended his own life. His mother remarried several times, and she had mental health problems, which landed her in a mental hospital. So she was kind of in and out of the hospital during his childhood. Danny looked a lot like his father, so his mother, by default, disliked him.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that happens a lot, I think, don't you? And I think it's wrong for a man or a woman to do that to a poor kid. Hell, they didn't ask for any of this. But if you have the spitting image of your significant other or ex or whatever, and they look just like them, down to the point where they act like them, same mannerisms, same way of talking.
Oh, you're talking about my daughter, huh?
And yeah, I mean,
looks just like her fucking daddy.
yeah, but you would never be like treat her shitty because of that, right?
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm
According to
sure.
her, I do.
Well,
That's
according to
15-year-old girls. I guess.
teenage girls, everybody sucks.
It's true.
No, but yeah, that sucks to be treated like
No,
that.
it does. I just think that's not good parenting, right?
It's not very healthy.
He had a turbulent childhood. He spent time living in a state group home for children, was kind of in and out of foster care. He failed his classes, skipped school, and by 13 had a reputation at school for being a horrible troublemaker.
Oh my God, here comes Danny.
Danny had less than an 8th grade education, a reputation, and no interest in learning any kind of skills or trade. Instead, he ran the streets of Savannah, experimenting with LSD and other drugs, cocaine, heroin, marijuana pills, whatever he could get his hands on. I mean, he's just a hot mess. He's trading sexual favors for money to buy drugs and alcohol at the age of 15. He ran away multiple times. His mother would report his runaway status. He would steal guns. She would turn him in for stealing guns from the family home. He would get picked up by police. I mean, it was just like a cycle, like Danny in and out of trouble. And at one point, Danny beat up his mother and had to be placed in a mental health treatment center. He was treated for emotional problems. In 1975, he tore a door off the hinges at his mama's house, and he was ordered to undergo a psychological exam at this point. And that is when Danny was diagnosed with a personality disorder. Danny was also diagnosed with unsocialized aggressive behavior. He continued running away from home, refusing to participate in school or getting a job. Eventually, at 17, he was likely ordered by a judge to enlist in the Air Force Reserves, where he was stationed in Charleston.
God, if I was a doctor, I'd be like, my God, man, this man's a full-blown shitbird.
My diagnosis is you have a shitbird personality disorder.
Well, it seems that you fly around and shit on people.
I hope that's not offensive to people who have personality disorders. I hope you know that we love you too.
No, we love you too. I'm sure we all have some kind of...
I was going to say Dylan and I both have significant mental disorders, so we're fine.
Yeah, but...
we have significant mental health issues around this place.
What Danny's doing is a lot of people have issues of some kind or another. I think we all do to some degree.
Well, yeah.
But what Danny's doing is he's letting those issues and what he went through in his life rule his life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you were to talk to a young Danny on the street there, up to no good, right? And not really trying.
I'm sorry, I just smelled my armpit and I think I might pass out.
Oh my God, the face you made.
I feel very disoriented.
So he would blame everything on his childhood and how he was brought up, right? That's why I can't have a job. That's why I do drugs. That's why I'm just running around being shitty.
You and I discuss this.
And that's what makes you a shitbird.
We try
I'm sorry.
not to get too, I guess, into it sometimes because we don't want to offend people. But there comes a point where you're like just a chronic victim or you're a survivor, and the survivors try to get help, turn their life around, make positive changes, and the victim just continues to be a victim their whole life, and they dwell on it and they don't do anything to make changes, and they're enabled and everything's an excuse. Oh, well, I can't, my childhood sucked. And it's like, oh, come on.
Right.
Not that I'm heartless, but at some point, get your fucking shit together.
Don't use it as a crutch. And if you will deal with these things, or at least stuff them down and quit letting them rule your life will be better for it.
Or seek help.
That's the point.
Do the right thing when it comes to treatment and a plan.
Hell, a lot of people can't afford therapy.
No, there's that.
But just have some fucking self-awareness and just be like, look, this happened. This is why I act this way. But when I act this way, I get these negative consequences. So unless I stop acting that way, nothing's going to change.
Danny lasted about 5 or 6 months before being discharged from the Air Force for quote-unquote behavior that was not tolerated in the military.
Well, he doesn't follow rules.
That could be a variety of things.
He doesn't play well with the others. He's just a mess.
Yeah, it seems like Danny's entire personality would not be tolerated in the military, let's be honest. So after that, Danny was arrested multiple times for petty crimes around Savannah. He was involved in several violent incidents. At one point, he was sent to Georgia Regional Hospital, where he was considered homicidal and acutely psychotic after attacking a neighbor with a chair.
Acutely psychotic. All right.
Yeah. I guess that's the opposite of being obtusely psychotic.
I think so. But it sounds like Danny definitely has significant personality disorders, anger issues, he has short temper, kind of loses his shit, and that can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
And that really
no self-control
affects the way you interact with people. I think a bad temper or short fuse is one of the worst personality one of the worst traits someone can have, even if they got it, through honest means.
You're looking at me when you say that.
No, you're all right. I must say you've been better since gummies. You started taking gummies. That's helped.
Oh my! Are you saying that marijuana has kept me from being homicidal?
No, you're not that bad. I would never I wouldn't consider you having a short fuse. I love people to just go to fuck off over nothing.
Yeah, I don't really have a short fuse.
Like you knock their drink
I
over.
can take shit for a long time, but it's when I reach that point and my fuse blows, that's when it's bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even like being around someone like that with a short fuse, bad temper, because it's like you're walking on eggshells.
Well, constantly, everything, like, it doesn't matter what, anything could set them off.
And I hate being around people like that.
I feel like we just described my dad. Well, in the early summer of 1979, Danny met Jim Williams, who ended up hiring him to help strip some finishes on furniture and clean crystal chandeliers. Now, at the time, Danny had begun dating an attractive woman named Debbie Blevins, who worked at a bar in Savannah. Now, Debbie said that Danny had uncontrollable bursts of violence, mood swings, and would go out of his way to do hurtful things to people. Like, he really enjoyed watching people cry or get upset. So he just likes making people feel bad.
Well, he's just leaning into it.
He's like a fucking sadist.
Yeah, and that's pretty disturbing.
Now, according to Debbie, there was no inkling that there was any kind of sexual relationship at all between Jim and Danny. Danny was wildly possessive of her. He beat up his girlfriend, Debbie, on several occasions. Danny got into a fight with an exterminator who sprayed his apartment for roaches.
Well, yeah,
he just, loses his shit on everybody.
There's no better way to show your love and want to control your girl by beating the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Right. That's just how he says, I love you.
And some exterminator just comes into the apartment building to spray, and Danny just gets mad and beats the shit out of him for no reason.
He's out of control.
Like, you're here doing your job, and I'm mad about that?
Yeah, I like the roaches, dude.
Yeah.
I've named them. There's Terry and Jim over there.
Okay. Well, on August 7th of 1980, Danny took 49 of Jim's Limbitrol pills and was hospitalized. Most people who knew Danny Hansford had unfavorable opinions of him.
As I could imagine.
Most of Jim's close friends couldn't understand why a man like Jim, polished and refined, would even associate with a person like Danny. So Danny was about 5'10" and weighed 155 pounds. He had a Confederate flag and a marijuana leaf tattoo on his right arm, along with a dragon-like creature on his left arm. And some people called him a squirmy-looking punk. And said that he was not good-looking at all. Others thought he had a certain sex appeal. A wild child with a large penis.
Oh, he's dragging that third leg behind him?
Apparently.
God damn it.
So one thing everybody agreed on when it came to Danny Hansford is that he was either high or drunk most of the time. Like, he was rarely ever sober. Friends told Jim Williams that Danny was a piece of shit and trouble, with one specifically saying, "That kid will make you sorry one day."
Well, you got Danny stays intoxicated and stuff, so covering up feelings, some shit he's never dealt with, I'm sure, the driving force of that. And you got just kind of out, I think Jim's known by his friends to kind of like these young, unpolished, kind of rough around the edges.
Scruffy, rough trade.
Yeah. Hey. But it sounds like Danny is that times 10 when you add in all the other, his personality traits, the bad temper, he's not afraid to lash out at people, enjoys seeing people cry or making them feel really, really bad or hitting them where it hurts, if you will. So it just sounds like I don't know. It just sounds like if I saw my friend, man, woman, whoever, around a guy like this, I'd be like, yeah, this guy's no good,
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Radical.
That's what I'm saying.
Great opinion.
You know what I'm saying?
As time went on, Jim seemed to rationalize having Danny in his life. Jim would explain that the young man was artistic. Jim was trying to help the boy develop something positive in his life. Danny repeatedly exploited and embarrassed Jim. Almost everyone was aware of Danny's reputation as a male hustler. And finally, when a friend asked, "Why are you keeping this guy around?" Jim Williams confessed, "He's good in bed."
Damn it.
You know what? People will put up with a lot for good sex.
I guess they will, but
I put up with a lot, and I don't even get good sex out of you.
I see, that's bullshit.
I was like waiting for you to come back with that one.
That's some
Okay,
bullshit.
that is some bullshit.
Yeah, you set me up on that.
That's right, y'all. Dylan's a sex machine.
That's right. If I'm laying flat
Since
on
we're
the,
spitting facts here, Dylan's a sex machine.
if I'm laying flat on the
Don't
floor
let
on my
him
stomach,
lie to you.
I can drag my penis along behind me too. But I got to be like laying on the floor.
Are you sure? Because I feel like it gets caught up in that weird little area between your fat belly and no. Anyway,
My fuda?
yeah.
Okay.
I already told you earlier that you could totally, if we were on the Oregon Trail, because I'm obsessed with playing that game.
Don't.
That you could sell your pubes as a pelt for $5 on the Oregon Trail.
Oh my God.
Like a fur trader would be very happy to have
I
that.
haven't had time to trim up lately.
Maybe it's a good time to plug that Smooth My Balls shaver.
Yes, if you'll.
If you use the discount Mountain Murders podcast, you'll get 20% off. Okay, anyway.
That's actually real.
It
Smooth
is.
my balls.
It is actually. I just haven't really been able to craft a positive message for shaving your balls yet. I'm still thinking about it.
They've sent it. I've used it. It works. Smooth balls.
Yeah, so I guess that's the end of our second commercial break.
Yep.
Okay, so for whatever reason, it did seem that Danny had some kind of upper hand when it came to Jim. Some saw Jim as a man who was attracted to danger and liked to live a little bit on the edge. Others saw Jim as truly trying to save this young man. Jim would buy him clothes. He tried to teach him manners, how to be a gentleman, all those things. But the relationship seemed to be all give and take. So Jim would spend money like crazy on Danny, and Jim was just giving. And for Danny, it was just never enough. Like he was just a sponge, just sucking Jim dry.
Well, it's almost like he views Danny as a fixer-upper, as a renovation project.
Exactly. Danny wanted more and more from Jim. No matter what Jim gave him, it was just never making Danny happy. Danny's violent outbursts continued throughout 1981. For no reason at all, he attacked Jim's other employee and started assaulting him, and Jim had to, call the police. I mean, it was a big mess, and nobody knew why. The guy's we'd really worked together, but we really never spoke at all, and then one day he just attacked me.
Yeah, screw that, dude.
Yeah.
He smashed him over the head with his big penis.
He was always drunk or high. He racked up DUIs and other arrests for fighting. And though Danny did work for Jim, he never seemed to have any kind of paycheck. Danny was always borrowing money from Jim, and if he refused him, Danny would fly into a rage. The morning of April 3rd, 1981, the men engaged in a very serious argument. Danny dropped by Mercer House to borrow $20 from Jim. So Jim gives him the money, but then Danny refuses to leave. Instead, he grew furious, complaining that one of his friends had insulted him about his car, and Jim told him, that's not my problem. Why are you bringing that bullshit over here? I don't give a fuck.
Somebody needs to whoop Danny's ass.
They do.
Running around here screaming and carrying on at $1.55. I'm like, dude, you need to shut the fuck up.
Squish you like a little grape.
Yeah.
I'd take that dude out. But Jim's like, that's not my problem, right? Don't bring your bullshit over here. And, I gave you money. Now move along. Danny, very angry at Jim's response, or lack thereof, smashed some antiques, including a bronze lamp and some ivory figurines. He slammed a glass water pitcher onto the ground so hard that it sent shards of glass flying and into Danny's arm. So he ends up hurting himself. Jim thought Danny had left. He went upstairs to brush his teeth, and that's when Danny appeared in the doorway with one of Jim's guns. He shot a hole in the floor, and Jim ended up wrestling the gun away from him, calling the police. The situation had spiraled so far out of control. So Danny spent the night in jail before Jim appeared before the judge, stating that he didn't wish to press charges.
Yeah, that's a mistake. I mean, Danny's not going to stop. He's not going to all of a sudden change everything and be thankful and try to make his life better, because his whole life has been about saying fuck it and just, being totally out of control. And he actually, honestly, he sounds like a toddler. He sounds like a big kid. I don't get my way, then I'm going to break your stuff, And then with Jim, he knows he loves the antiques and that's all his collection, very passionate about it. So he instantly breaks antiques to fuck with Jim. You know what I mean? That's just a mean person. And I know Jim rationalizes it as, oh, this, I have feelings, or I care about him, this, blah. But at a certain point, you have to just...
This is toxic.
This is toxic. It's not going to change.
It's going nowhere.
It's going nowhere.
Nowhere good.
Right. It's going the wrong way.
Jim was quick to forget the outburst, and only about a week later, he made reservations for Danny to join him on a trip to London and Geneva. Jim had these fainting spells and hypoglycemia. He also would take large sums of money and was concerned about being robbed, so he usually would take someone with him on these trips. But when Danny realized Jim was expecting him to wear a suit and tie and that he wasn't allowed to use drugs on this trip, he declined to go. Now, here's what I'm asking. What kind of fucking person is going to turn down a trip to London and Geneva, all expenses paid, when you know you're probably going to be staying at like the Ritz because Jim traveled in style, all because I can't smoke weed and I have to wear a suit? Like, what the fuck, man?
Well, you could have snuck around, done a little drugs, man. Calm down.
Well, yeah, especially if you're going to be in Europe.
Near Amsterdam and shit. Come on.
Well, no one knows for sure what happened in the early morning hours of March 2nd at Mercer House. The pair went to see a triple zombie. I think it was May 2nd. I'm sorry, I said March, but it was May. So the pair went to see a triple zombie feature at a drive-in. And while they were there, Danny consumed about 8 or 9 marijuana joints. He had a half pint of bourbon and started on the second pint of bourbon because he said he wasn't drunk yet. Now, who can drink a pint of bourbon and not be feeling the effects?
Who's going to smoke 8 or 9 joints, dude?
You?
In a couple of hours? No, no. In a couple of hours?
That's only because I won't let you.
Jesus. No, the society won't let me, okay?
It's a damn lie.
But, I mean, come on. So it's all about excess. It's never enough for him.
Yeah, so he's not drunk yet. Half a pint of bourbon, which is crazy to me. I can have like a shot of bourbon, and I'm like, oi.
Well, I guess what I had to realize is you don't have to get drunk. You can just have a little bit of bourbon and get a slight buzz, and then not be, and then your buzz goes away.
Okay,
that's okay.
That's a cute monologue that you've just practiced for the podcast, but we both know that that's a damn lie.
No, I'm more of a social drinker now than before I met you. I know that there is people that only have 2 or 3 beers and stop.
Yeah, that's because I've put you through the Heather Hyatt training program.
It's true.
I have broken your spirit.
No, it's not true.
And
you can't never break my spirit.
And now you're just poor little henpecked Dylan.
It's fun.
But at least you're sober, right?
It's fun to only drink a little bit sometimes.
I know. You were out of control when I met you. I almost didn't even want to be around you sometimes.
What's a damn lie? Hey, whoa.
It's true.
It's getting too real.
There were a couple times I was like, I don't think I need to date you.
Was it a red flag?
It was a very big red. You know this. Early on, this was something that we discussed.
When I pissed in your closet, was that a red flag?
Oh my God. Are you going to tell people that story?
Why not?
Yeah, he totally pissed in my closet. On my fucking shoes.
On her fucking shoes.
Oh, and that was... You can piss on my granny, but don't piss on my fucking shoes, Dylan. You know how I love shoes.
Hey, well, look. I've never done it before. I've never done it since. And
damn right you hadn't done it since, or you wouldn't be living in my damn house.
I was emotionally distressed during that period. I was drinking too much. And, you just have to grow and move on from that. And you also have to clean your piss up.
Yeah. Thanks for cleaning my shoes up. I'll have you know I got rid of those. I haven't even worn them since you cleaned them. Well, it was around 12:30 a.m. that Jim and Danny returned to Mercer House together. They played Atari and backgammon. Danny began talking about his girlfriend, his mother, his best friend. It seemed he had beefs with all 3 of them. And as he was bitching about these people in his life, just flew into a rage.
Okay, this dude sounds so cool to be around.
He's like, fuck my girlfriend, and then just flies into a rage. He smashes the Atari. Say it ain't so. And the remaining bourbon, throws it on the floor. Now, Jim orders him to leave. Get the fuck out. Danny allegedly grabbed Jim and pushed him against a door. Jim went to the study to call police, and that's when Danny left this room and returned with a Luger. Now, he told Jim, I'm leaving this town tomorrow, but you're leaving this town tonight. He, is angry. He's yelling this shit at Jim. Jim reaches into his desk drawer, and that's when he grabs the Luger he keeps in his drawer. Danny supposedly aimed the gun at Jim, pulls the trigger, a bullet grazes Jim's right arm. And then that's when Jim pulls the trigger on his gun. He fired more than once in rapid succession. Jim then calls his friend Joe, and next his attorney. Thirdly, he called police.
Okay.
Now, Jim told officers that he had shot his house guest in self-defense. Now, later in the morning, Jim was placed under arrest. His friend showed up at the Chatham County Jail with $25,000 to bail him out. On May the 6th, Jim was given permission by a judge to leave the country for London, then Geneva, so he could make it to these auctions.
So, honestly, if he shot him and he's dead, and it's not like they can save his life, if medical help arrives sooner rather than later, I think I would call my attorney in that situation before I called the cops, honestly. So I don't think that makes Jim a monster or anything like that. But if it was the difference between, life-saving medical care, then he could have done that differently. But do you think that's bad or crazy or is sensible?
No, I just think with the way 85% of investigations go in this country, I would likely call an attorney first too. Especially if I had like an attorney on speed dial.
Right. If I had an attorney who's my attorney.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, once details began emerging about Jim and Danny's relationship, Savannah society began stepping away from the once revered decorator. By June 12th, the Chatham County prosecutor was presenting evidence to a grand jury, and they ultimately decided to charge Jim Williams with premeditated murder. Jim had no history of violent behavior, so the murder charge was shocking to most folks because they had a lot of respect for this man. After the indictment came down, Jim went on a second European shopping trip, and then he hosted his famous Christmas party. What would come next was a circus with Jim Williams front and center. The first trial, because there are multiple trials, Dylan.
Nice.
Williams was accused of murdering Danny Hansford while the defendant maintained the shooting was self-defense. A police officer testified that he found Hansford lying face down with a pistol under his right hand. He was shot in the back, chest, and above the right ear. Bullet holes in the floor corresponded with the shots in Hansford's head, I'll get this out, and his back. The leg of a chair rested on top of Danny's pants leg.
Oh, really?
A bullet had passed through some papers on a desk, and lead fragments were recovered from the chair behind the desk. Now, it was on the desk that police found the gun that Jim Williams had used. Police also testified that Danny's hands were bagged immediately, yet no gunpowder residue was found on them. The prosecution presented a scenario that Danny's murder was staged and he had not fired a gun at all. Jim Williams, in theory, had shot Danny Hansford with the gun he put on his desk, then shot his desk and chair with a second gun that he placed under Danny's hands. That is what the prosecution is painting.
Right, and so they're going for full-blown, premeditated, first-degree murder.
Williams took the stand to testify that Danny had been drinking and shot him, though he missed. He then fired 3 shots at Danny. He also said this was not the first time that Danny Hansford had been violent with him. Well, a jury convicted Jim Williams on February 2nd of 1982, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The conviction was overturned in January of 1983 by the Georgia Supreme Court after they found an error in the officer's testimony. Jim's second trial began in September of 1983, and though the evidence was largely the same, Williams' attorney encouraged him to admit that he was a homosexual on the stand.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the first trial didn't go good for him, right? He was convicted, and it seems like it wouldn't be that hard for a defense attorney to bring forth witness after witness stating about Danny's kind of out of control character and behavior. I mean, that would be my entire case.
Well, once again, Jim Williams was convicted of first-degree murder in October of 1983. Then in June of 1985, Williams' sentence was once again overturned. He went on trial again in spring of 87. Pardon me. A nurse then testified that she had actually bagged Danny's hands at the hospital before the autopsy, and this could have caused the loss of gunpowder residue on Danny's hands. So on June 9th of 1987, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. The defense tried seeking to bar another trial on grounds of double jeopardy, but that was denied in 1988. So Jim Williams' fourth trial was held in Augusta, Georgia, after a change of venue request.
Wow, so that's an explosive piece of evidence being overturned there. If you have this nurse saying that they weren't bagged on the scene, the body arrived, and she was asked to bag his hands after he arrived to the hospital. Because I'm sure that's the key piece of evidence, no matter what you thought about Danny or Jim, that juries couldn't get past.
Exactly.
Is the fact that his hand didn't have any gunshot residue, which in my mind would be very, be like, wow, how can you explain that? But then that just takes that off the table in a way. So that's pretty interesting. That's an explosive, was it exculpatory evidence?
It was you're exactly right. It was a big piece of information. It was on May 9th of 1989 that a jury acquitted Williams. It took them about 45 minutes to return the verdict. And actually, the judge said it was about 15 minutes, and they spent 30 minutes trying to find Williams' lawyer. So the jury in 15 minutes was like, nope, acquitted.
Wow.
And this was out of Savannah. So this is in another town where people didn't really know Williams, didn't know his reputation, had no skin in the game.
Well, I mean, after multiple trials and the way it was such a big story in Savannah, I think a change of venue is a sensible request as well.
The case was complex, but ultimately shoddy investigative work and perjury by the police department led to this decision. So 8 months after his acquittal, Jim Williams died in his home at age 59. He had heart failure and pneumonia.
What the hell?
He had spent about $1 million on his defense during 4 trials. In December, before his death, he held his famous Christmas party, only inviting friends who had stood by him during the trial. Or trials. He began suffering from bronchitis in January, and on the 13th of January, he had gone to a party, though he hadn't been feeling well. One of his employees found him lying on the floor of his study near where Danny Hansford had died. Others say he was in the foyer area. Jim Williams, the man who forever changed Savannah's course, was buried in Gordon, Georgia, in Ramah Church Cemetery. Now, Jim made it clear to folks that he never got along with his sister, so he left her only $10 in his will. His estate went to his mother, Blanche, whom he dearly loved, but she passed away in 1997, and the estate made its way to his sister. Some of Jim's finest pieces were auctioned off. Mercer House was put on the market, but with a hefty price tag, never sold, and has been open to the public since 2004 for tours.
Oh, so it's still a part of the estate, and now they just make money off by letting people tour it.
Yep.
Wow.
There is no doubt the city of Savannah owes Williams a debt of gratitude. Without a visionary like Jim Williams, much of the historical areas would not exist today or make the city the tourist draw that it is. As we've mentioned, a book called Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil was written by John Berendt and was published in 1994. The book was turned into a film by Clint Eastwood in 1997. And as I mentioned earlier, Berendt didn't approve of Kevin Spacey's portrayal of Jim Williams. Like, he had told him to go listen to some of the audio recordings of Williams, like the police investigation and stuff, and to listen to some of the trial tapes. And he's not sure that Kevin Spacey did this, and he thinks if Kevin Spacey listened to those tapes, that it was during one testimony where Williams had been given Valium, and I guess kind of appeared a little, like, loopy or something.
Oh, so maybe he poured on the Southern gentleman drawl.
Yeah, it seems like that
just a little too much.
Was the case.
Okay.
Now, in my opinion, Williams was not guilty of premeditated murder. I mean, And this is why I gathered this opinion, Dylan. This is a man who had spent over 30 years working diligently to earn his position in Savannah's high society. And after looking into this case at length, I'm talking, I've, looked at this story for years. I don't believe that Jim shot him. It was premeditated murder. I do believe it was self-defense.
Well, just given all the information in your story just now, I kind of feel the same way. And certainly, I think it was a surprise for them to go for first-degree murder anyway, because you're setting a pretty high bar there. Because if anything, they're even if they get in a fight, and Danny once again starts breaking his stuff, he knocks over the 18th century grandfather clock, which is gonna piss Jim off and make him mad. And I'm sure some people thought, well, that's why, or he's done all these things to Jim, and he finally had enough, and he got pissed and shot him. That'd still be in the heat of the moment. I'd still be second degree at most, I think. So, no, I think but given Danny's violent behaviors and everything you just described, I think it would be hard to say it wasn't self-defense. I mean,
well, and I
easy.
think if you've had this person in your home and they have this history of violence and they've previously shown up in the doorway while you're brushing your teeth with a gun telling you, I'm going to kill you, I want to kill you, and then they come at you a second time with a gun, I think most people's natural instinct would be, if there's a gun nearby, to grab it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we all have that fight or flight instinct.
No, it's true.
Well, resources for today's story, of course, I've read the book and the movie Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. But also, I read a book called After Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by Marilyn Bardsley. It's a great book. She has a lot of interviews, firsthand accounts with people who knew these two guys. Articles by Savannah Now, Online Athens, and various court records also helped me write today's case.
Would you say her book tries to give a more personal and realistic view of the characters involved in this?
I do, and I think she is an attorney, like a retired attorney. She's not from Savannah. She moved there, became fascinated with the story, and then started researching and writing this book. So I feel like it's a more objective opinion because she wasn't really like a player in this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And she takes the time to go interview multiple people, does tons of research. It's a great book. It's on Kindle for free if you have a Kindle subscription.
Nice.
Yeah, so check it out. Anyway, that has been today's story. Don't forget we have that live show September 24th. You can buy tickets, brownpapertickets.com, or find the links on our social media. And we have joined radiofreeasheville.com. You can stream the podcast there, and we are also part of the Podbreed Network. So make sure if you're checking out Mountain Murders, you also look at some of the other wonderful podcasts associated with Podbreed if you're looking for some new material.